Now then, Vinyl Monkey again, on home territory this week, really well, almost home. Talking about a Geordie band, one of the great bands from Newcastle, and this is me ranking my Lindisfarne albums. Lindisfarne, what a band, yeah, fantastic, different, not folky, not rocky, not poppy, manoeuvring really in between these sort of styles, very different to the sort of folk rock that was going about at the time, whether that was the sort of, Fairport or Steel Ice Band or whatever, but they created their own sound, and a lot of that was down to the genius songwriting of Alan Hull. And if anybody wants to explore that a bit further, if you haven't already seen it, BBC4 did a recent documentary. Sam Fender sort of fronted it. Alan Hull, Geordie Genius or something like that. But Sam Fender following the footsteps of his hero. I'll come on to that a bit anyway, but Lindisfarne are still, I think they're still going actually. They've in one form or another, they've been going for over 50 years. They sort of started about 1969, 70, but I'm only going to cover their albums in the first 10 years or so of their existence, and as usual I'm gonna rank them down from what I think's my worst to my best, in my humble opinion. So we'll get started. There were, in this period, the sort of 70 to 79 period, there were three different phases for the band, if you like. There was phase one, their first three albums, which was the original band, which is I should just I can name these off the top of my head, but Rod Clements on bass, Alan Hull vocals and acoustic guitar, Ray Jackson vocals and mandolin. Lead vocals tended to be shared by Ray Jackson and Alan Hull. Simon Cow on guitars and banjos and mandolins, and Ray Laidlaw on drums. So that was the band that the original band that produced their first three albums, and then that band sort of split in half. Half of them stayed with the name Lindisfarne, recruited some new Geordies as members, and released a couple more LPs. The other half formed a band which got a lot of credibility but not much commercial success, a band called Jack the Lad. But then in the late 70s, the band, I think they united for a sort of what was going to be a one-off Christmas sort of special, but then they decided to get back together and they started releasing albums again. So I'm going to cover those three different phases, and so it's 7 albums in total I've got, and my number 7 comes from 1973, and this is the album, this is their sort of fourth album, Roll on Ruby. So this is the first album after that first split up, when they recruited the two of the original members, Ray Jackson there and Alan Hull, recruited some new members, and this was the first one they produced. And it's a good sounding album, but it's much more middle of the road. It's much less experimental than their first three. It's much less interesting in many ways. It's also got a terrible cover. One of the joys of vinyl owning and collecting is the covers as the records are playing. Appreciating the artwork or the lyrics or the photography or whatever. And I don't know what they were thinking about with this. It's bloody awful, really. It just looks, even by allowing for different standards of taste in different decades, that's a bloody awful cover, and it just puts me off from the start. But that aside, it's not a terrible album, and there are some good tracks on it. There's a great Alan Hull song, When the War is Over, about a relationship. which would probably be, I'd put it up there maybe with his best half dozen songs, except that it's spoilt at the end by a bit of over elaborate orchestration in my view, and unnecessary orchestration, but that's a sort of brilliant track. And also Lazy, another Alan Hull song, and I think you'll find this right through these LPs, that the songwriting, particularly Alan Hull's, but some of the other members as well, there's always a couple of gems on each of these albums. But this album, unfortunately, it really tails off at the end. The last 3 tracks, it almost sounds like it's a different band. So I've got it down as my number 7. It's Roll On Ruby from 1973. My number 6 was the album which followed that, so still the sort of Lindisfarne Mark II, if you like, still the new iteration. And talk about awful covers. This one is, I mean, it really is terrible. I don't know what it's called. Happy Days. It's from 1974. Straight ahead photos on the front. I mean, they're all right, but that's not an LP cover with any imagination or thought in it, is it? It's yeah, bloody awful. But anyway, stop ranting on about them. You don't want to hear me talking about that. This one it's got a lot of shared songwriting on here, and as such it sounds like really a bit of a mixed bag. Again, some nice stuff, 2 really nice Alan Hull songs. Again, I'm just looking at my notes over here. River and Gin and Tonics All Around. So again, there happen to be 2 Alan Hull songs, probably the 2 strongest on the album, in my opinion. Tom Duffy, the new bassist who joined the band the year before this, he sings on a few of these, and I don't know, I think his singing's a bit weak. I mean, I love Alan Hull's singing. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. It's you know, it's plaintive, it's angry, it's passionate, it's fragile, it's, you know, it's all of those things. You can feel the emotion in Alan Hull's voice, but not so across the board. And I think, yeah, a bit of a mixed bag. Not a bad album, couple of good songs. Happy Days, 1974. My number 5 is Back and Forth, a sort of play on words, and it's a better cover. It's not brilliant, but it's better. It's got the lyrics inside. It's the first of their covers to actually feature Lindisfarne, the island, and the castle on the cover. And this was the first album when the band got back together, so this was 1978, and they've called it Back and Forth because it's, in a sense, it's the original band's 4th album. So although it's Lindisfarne's 6th album, it's actually their 4th from the original band. I hope you're following this, but and this included the sort of last big hit they ever had, I suppose. This was Run for Home, again another Alan Hull song. It's a bit one of the critics on the internet call it Springsteen-esque, and yeah, you can see that. It's a great song. It made the charts, and they were reinvigorated briefly, but it's a pretty strong album. Gus Dudgeon, Elton John's producer, produced it. It's got a good poppy. It's maybe a little bit middle of the road. It's not edgy, it's not experimental, it's not like their early stuff, but it ain't bad at all. And that's Back and Forth with the great track Run for Home in there, from 1978. My number 4 was the album that followed that from 1979. This is The News. This is a really, really good album. Strong songs, nice playing. Favourite songs, 1983 and Another Log on the Fire. And just a consistently strong album, and again showing that there was still ideas in the band, still good songs coming out, particularly from Alan Hull, as I keep saying. So that's my number 4. That's The News from 1979. Then it'll be no surprise to those of you who know Lindisfarne and are familiar with them that my top three is their first three albums, and so over the 1970 to 1972 period. And my number three was their third album. This is Dingley Dell, upside down, from 1972. Really plain cover, just the title and the band's title, and allegedly, according to some interview or other, the band felt that more than it's the music that's important. But I quite like the minimalism of this cover. It isn't a bad one. It stands out. I remember liking it at the time, buying this at the time, as a 15-year-old or whatever, and I really liked the plainness of that cover. The critics bashed this album. It had to follow on the back of the first two albums, which were critically well received, and the second one particularly commercially successful. And the critics just put the boot into this one. I wonder whether it's perhaps because it was more overtly political. There are songs in here like All Fall Down, Poor Old Island, Caught in the Act, which are, talking about the Irish political situation, having a go at planners. There's a track called Bring Down the Government. Maybe, critics often don't like that, particularly these sort of middle class university educated ones, in my opinion. I like this album. I bought it new when it came out, and I vehemently disagreed with the critics at the time, but now I suppose, listening to it in the cold light of day, 50 years on, I do have to accept that probably on balance the songs aren't as strong as the first two albums. But what a shame, because I think the critical response to this and the pressure that came on the band after this forced that split. And that just seems such a shame, because it is obvious that they had much, much, much more to offer, which, who knows if they hadn't have split, what their fourth and fifth albums might have been. But anyway, that's my number three. A really good album. Favourite songs are All Fall Down, Dingley Dell itself, the title track, which is the last track on the album, and Poor Old Island. But my number three, Dingley Dell from 72. My number two is perhaps their most famous album. It's a great cover as well, picture of the Newcastle quayside in the, it's the 18th century or something like that. But this is Fog on the Tyne. Lovely photographs inside as well. You won't be able to see those, but they're really sort of blurry photographs from the individual members of Lindisfarne in what looks like a workies club, having a pint, talking to the barmaid, etc. Just an absolutely almost perfect album. Had the hit singles, Meet Me on the Corner, Fog on the Tyne itself. It's got the beautiful January song. It's just absolutely excellent all the way through. I don't know what more to say about it, really. Obviously they reissued Fog on the Tyne, redid it with Gaza. Was that in the 80s or the 90s? Must have been the early 90s or late 80s, I suppose. But by then Lindisfarne had become a bit of a sort of a Christmas party band, really, rather than maybe serious. But this was superb. If you haven't got this album, I'd suggest go out and get it. It's Fog on the Tyne, my number two from 1971. And then my number one. Talk about perfect albums. This is their debut album. This is Nicely Out of Tune from 1970. It starts off with the absolutely beautiful love song Lady Eleanor, and then there just isn't really a weak moment on it. I think if I had to pick the weakest track, it's the only cover on they do a Woody Guthrie song, Jackhammer Blues. They do it really, really well, but that is perhaps the weakest song. But it's different, it's varied, it's yeah, it sounded different to anything else that was around at the time. They've got the a cappella singing on Clear White Light, and then they've got my favourite ever Lindisfarne song on here. And if you're not familiar with Lindisfarne and you want to listen to one song, listen to Alan Hull's Winter Song from this album. A perfect album, perfect song. Yeah, absolutely beautiful. My number one, nicely out of tune, from 1970. So that was a quick run through Lindisfarne's. I'm not sure how many more bands I've got enough records of to do a sort of countdown worst to best, but because I've got a lot of them on CDs and I don't want to be holding them up and rattling on about them given the title of this channel. So I might have to try something different from here on in, but thanks for watching, listening anyway. Alright, cheers.